when I went back with my second flight, we could see a lot of tracer bullets. Lots and lots of tracer bullets are coming towards us.
Just on 2, clear takeoff, left hand. Takeoff left, middle left, slim west, copy.
Hello and welcome to the Blueskies Podcast. I'm PR Ganapathy, your host.
Just need 70, Roger, report time southeast, connection, for midway, and view selected.
It's my great pleasure today to speak to Squad Leader Pushp Vaid. Squad Leader Vaid was commissioned into the helicopter stream of the Indian Air Force in 1963, and he had a critical part to play as a young flight lieutenant during the 71 operations, where his helicopters and the helicopters under his command were used brilliantly by General Sagat Singh and Group Captain Chandan Singh to airlift troops into critical areas. And so today we're going to be speaking to Squad Leader Vaid about his experiences operating the Me-4 helicopter during the 71 operations. But, after he left service, he went on to fly helicopters in the British Isles, and he had some interesting experiences there. So hopefully we'll have time to get to it. Squad Leader Vaid was awarded Veer Chakra for his incredible acts of bravery during the 71 operations. And, his story and his experiences are truly something to behold. Welcome to the program, sir, and thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So we start off with asking our guests about their background growing up and what was their motivation to join the Air Force and what was that initial journey into the Air Force, the initial training, what was that like? So where did you grow up and what motivated you to join the Air Force?
Well, my parents were in what is now West Pakistan, and we had, my grandfather was a landlord, and he had a lot of properties, and he was a contractor, government contractor. So he had millions and millions of dollars or pounds or whatever you call them in those days. And we even built a cinema hall at that time in 1941. And even my father went to Leeds in UK in 1936 to do his civil engineering. So, imagine in those days going to Leeds to learn all about it, because my grandfather decided that if I have my own civil engineer, I don't have to employ other people, So
Right.
that's what my father did. Just before the war, he came back after his degree.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1947, of course, we had to leave everything and migrate to Delhi. My father had joined the Indian Army at that time. And he got posted to Ambala. And we had a huge house and maybe 5 acres of land and stuff like that. And when the partition took place, all the people who probably knew us a little bit even ended up in our garden and pitched up tents there to live, because they didn't know where to go,
Wow.
because everybody was trying to migrate from West Pakistan into India.
Right.
And we had nearly 100 people living in our garden. So my father said, I can't cope with that. So we had to request for a posting from there, and we moved to Delhi. And of course, we were helping as much as we could, but you can't look after 100 people,
No,
it's a lot of people to look after. And of course, everybody had lost everything.
Yeah.
And come over.
How old were you then, sir?
I was born 41, so I was 6 years old. Youngster,
6 years old.
For us,
Wow.
for us, it is a good game, play with other kids and have a good time, So, so from then we moved to Delhi, and we lived in Delhi. Did all my schooling and everything in Delhi.
Okay, right.
I always wanted to fly. That is one of my ambitions, to fly. And my mother used to keep telling me, very dangerous, don't want you to fly. So I joined NDA. When I joined NDA, I put Navy as my preference.
Oh, wow.
And I reached NDA, and then I asked the bosses over there, can I change over to Air Force? Yeah, no problem. So they changed me over to the Air Force,
Wow.
and that's where I did my gliding and stuff like that. Of course, like in India, you do your gliding for the last 2 years,
Right.
and then
Yeah.
come to flying school in Jodhpur, did my flying there.
Okay.
And when we finished at Texans flying, 62 war had started.
Uh-huh.
And they suddenly realized they had no helicopters and no helicopter pilots, or very few
Right.
helicopters.
Yeah.
And they said, we need some volunteers. And the carrot was, you'll get a commission straight away. Otherwise we would have got commission in March.
Mhm.
They were giving it us in beginning of January,
Okay.
2 months early. I mean, after doing
Right.
4 years, it really wouldn't have made any difference to go 3 months.
Right.
The other carrot was, of course, you'll go to UK to get your training.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So we said, okay. So I put my hand up, and 20 of us put our hands up. And within 2 days of putting our hand up, we were marched into the air headquarters. One squadron leader was attached to us. 10 of us came first. One squadron leader was attached to us, and his job was get us passport, get us commission, and get us on the aircraft to London.
My
Within 2
God.
days, 48 hours. And he achieved it. He was absolutely wonderful. We were running like I don't know what, but we got the passport, we got the visas, we got the tickets, we got the commission. We
Wow.
went into the racecourse Air Force station,
Mhm.
and the CEO over there said, "Have you got your rings?" He said, "Yes, we got our rings." So he said, "Okay, just he went and put everybody's rings on. Or I think he told us to put the rings on." So we became pilot
Okay.
officers.
Wow.
And then he
Fascinating.
said, we said, "Can we put our wings on?" He said, "Nobody told me anything about wings." He says, "I think you better wait till you finish your helicopter training." So we
Oh,
didn't put our wings
okay.
on
Uh-huh.
till we finish our helicopter training. And when we finished our helicopter training, nobody told us to put them on or not. We just put them on.
Put them on. And what was this program under which you'd be getting this training in Britain?
We had all the your foreign countries like Russia, France, UK, and USA offered to train helicopter pilots.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So UK trained 20 pilots. So 10 of us went to Oxford and 10 of us went to Red Hill. Red Hill was Bristol's and Oxford was another small helicopter company.
Okay.
And
Oh, these were private companies. This is
private
not,
companies, yeah.
Okay.
Bristol is also a private company, and
Uh-huh.
they took. I mean, British government, of course, paid for our training,
Right. Mhm.
and 10 of us were in this little helicopter. And we had no warm clothes, we had no money, we had nothing,
Wow.
And Air Force said, "We'll send you salary." Nobody bothered to send us salary.
Oh,
So
my
after about 2
goodness.
weeks or 3 weeks of waiting, I rang up my dad. I said, "I got no money. Can you send me some?" So he sent some money over to me,
Wow.
So all of us had to do the same thing. All 10 of us, or maybe all
Right,
20 of us, We
Yeah.
got our salary only when we got back to India,
To India. Yeah, my father did a test pilot's course in ETPS in 62.
Okay.
And he said Forex was in such short supply, they were really struggling to make ends meet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They nobody. I mean, we had hardly any money at all. Of course, we didn't really need any money because everything was
Right.
looked after by the British government.
Uh-huh. What helicopter did they train you on, sir?
Brantley B2s. It was just like a Bell 47.
Uh-huh.
Just a
Okay.
two-seater. Nice aircraft. But it had rotor blade, and which was split into two, and in the middle also they had a little flapping thing. And the first half of the rotor blade was thick, and then it became thinner. The rest next half was a thinner rotor blade.
Right,
But it
right.
seemed to work okay, so no problem. We did
And
about
was that a
40
piston
hours.
engine or a turbine engine?
Piston.
Piston engine.
Yeah. I think turbines came later on. Turbines came later on.
Right. What was your first experience like flying a helicopter compared to, much more powerful and
No, helicopter was good fun because you're more like a bird. You can land anywhere, you can take off from anywhere, you can go backwards, you can go forwards, you can go sideways. It was wonderful. I loved it
Right,
from the day one. I had no preference, which aircraft I'm going to go to, fighters or transport, and then some people
Right.
just love fighters and some people like
Yeah.
transport. I had
Right.
no preference as such, and I had not seen helicopters, so
Right.
I said, why not, go get my commission and go to UK and have a look at there and
Right. And so how long was the
We were
training?
there
What all did the syllabus cover?
January to April, 3rd or 4th
Okay.
of April we came back. And for
Mhm.
3 months, we never saw the ground because it was covered with snow the entire 3 months. So that's the impression
Wow.
I had of UK. The UK was always covered in snow in the winter time.
You were asking yourself, where are those green rolling hills they spoke to
Yeah,
me
that's
about?
right. And of course, that is the coldest year they had for 100 years. And we happened to
Wow.
turn up there, No, it was good fun. It is really,
What was
really
the
all.
syllabus like? So what all did they train you
Oh,
on?
just teaching us how to fly, basically.
Basic
It was
circuits and
good fun.
landings,
And after about
cross-country
5 or 6 hours
navigation.
each, yeah, after
Mhm.
5, 6 hours each, we did our solos and stuff like that. And normal training program, whichever you
Mhm.
have, or most other places, same thing we were
Okay,
following.
great.
Yeah.
So then you came back in April, and
Yeah,
where were
April
you
we came back
posted in?
and got posted to Tezpur
Ah,
in MIFOS. MIFOS had just
uh-huh.
started coming in. They just
Okay.
came in '62. After
Mhm.
the Russians gave it to us.
Yeah.
And some of our pilots had gone to Russia to learn on the MIFOS, and
Mhm.
they came back as instructors. They were teaching
Right.
us. So
Uh-huh.
they had hardly any experience either.
Right.
So but they were
What had
teaching.
they been flying before that? What helicopters did we
They
have
must have
before
been
we got the
flying. We
MiFo?
had the Bell 47s, and I think
Right.
we had some Alvids as well. I don't remember
Mhm.
what all we had. I think we had Alvids and Bell 47s at that time.
Okay. Right.
So they probably were flying those.
Right.
But of course, Bells and Alvids are such tiny helicopters compared to the MiFos.
Compared to the
MiFo
MiFo.
was a big helicopter.
Right. So can I ask you to just spend a few minutes telling us about the Mi 4? What is it like? I know I'll upload some pictures so that people can see, but just describe it to us and
Yeah,
what is it
MiFo is
designed for?
it is almost a copy of Sqn 55. It is
Mhm.
almost made the same way. The cockpit is on
Right.
the top and the cabin is at the bottom. It looks like the Russians had a photograph of the S-55. See, when they saw the Korean War and
Right.
how the helicopters are being used, the Russians
Mm.
decided that they want to build get some helicopters as well, because they didn't have many helicopters. So
Mhm.
they picked up this Sqn 55, and only thing they made it 3 or 4 times bigger than
Right.
the 55. And
Mhm.
even our manual we uh, had no resemblance to what we used to do, because
Mhm.
they even different manuals came after different years had different figures in it. They used to keep
Wow.
changing it, and I think they were learning themselves how much can we do and
Right.
how much you can't do.
Mhm.
It is lovely helicopter in the sense that first of all, its whole life was only 3,000 hours, because again
Okay.
it was a brand new thing they were learning themselves.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
rotor blades, when they originally came, they were made out of wood.
Oh, wow.
And later on they changed them to metal and stuff like that. And
Uh-huh.
their technical man used to come, and they only had a life of 100 hours. The blades had a life of only 100 hours. So at the end of 100 hours, one corporal or sergeant or somebody will come along from the Russians, and they'll tick 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 along the blades. Oh, that looks okay. Next one, tick 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 tick. That looks okay. Tick, 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 tick. Little like a hammer he had. Tick tick tick. Just with
Uh-huh.
the noise, he could make out if something was
Wow.
wrong or not. Okay, and 100 hours extension. And we were the guinea pigs. We were the one who were flying them. So he used to keep giving 100 hours extension all the time.
Wow.
Regularly. And even when we had some problem with the engine or whatever, they rush, and we'll call the Russians to come over, and they'll have a look and says, pilot error, engineer error, pilot error, engineer error. They never admitted
Wow.
there's something wrong with the Russians. We had a cooling fan,
Mhm.
and it had blades in it. What, that big blades, maybe
Mhm.
6 inches by 3 inches or something,
Mhm.
and they were put in a rim, and there was a rim on top holding them together. But if one came out, all of them would come out.
Oh.
You know what I mean? None of them are
Mhm.
bolted individually.
Ah, right, right. So
Eh,
each one would spin the other.
So if one came out, everything came out,
Oh
and
my.
it did come out 1 or 2 times.
Right.
And every time it came out, of course, it was a major incident. And
Mm.
well, like once I was on the base leg, or downwind, and one came out, I just had to go land quickly on the ground.
Mhm.
And luckily I landed immediately. No other damage was done. Only one blade had come out, and of course they changed the blades and everything. And of course it is pilot error or maintenance error or whatever error.
Wow.
And the next time the new blades came, they were all clipped in. Every one of
Mm.
them had a little screw in them. So I'm just giving you an
Right.
example of what Russians are doing. They were learning from
Right.
us.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Wow.
And improving it all the time. But lovely
And so, what
helicopter.
capacity did it have? How many
Well,
people could
usually they
carry?
said
And
14 passengers,
14 passengers.
and I don't remember the whole full figures.
Mm.
But we,
And so,
during the
you
war,
get in through a side door and climb up a ladder to the cockpit. Is that how
yeah,
it works?
that is for the co-pilot. Captain had a
Mm.
steps outside.
Outside, okay.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it had 2 steps, and then you could go into the cockpit.
And it had
And
clamshell doors at the back,
yeah,
isn't it?
clamshell doors. Yeah, during the war we
Mm.
took them out because it was much easier to jump out and jump in,
Right.
and we had a side door from which the passengers could get in. Yeah,
And it was single engine, twin engine?
Sqn engine, 1400 horsepower,
Okay.
twin 7 cylinders each.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's
And
a piston. No, it is not a turbine engine.
no turbine, piston engine.
Oh,
Piston
wow.
engine. I've flown it at 20,000 feet as well. We had a
With a
supercharger on it. You put the
turbocharger.
supercharger on,
Right.
and then you can climb to more than 10,000 feet. Of course, we were not pressurized,
Fascinating.
and
So you had oxygen, is it?
no, we used, when we were flying at 20,000 feet, we could carry one bottle of oxygen. Why we went to 20,000 feet was that one AN-12 coming back from Leh to Chandigarh, 1968, had started descending too early and gone into the mountains and crashed,
Right.
and they couldn't find it. So 2 Me-4s were sent to a place called Kelong, which is north of Kulu, and it's 11,000 feet. We were based at 11,000 feet.
Wow.
And the army was very kind. They made a strip for us, 200-yard strip, so we could run down the runway and to pick up our transition speed. Transition speed is 40 knots, 40 kilometers. And once you cross the transition speed, then the power required to get airborne is less.
Wow.
So we were able to take full load. Otherwise, according to the charts, we were not allowed to carry anything at that height.
Wow.
But we were carrying full load, no bother at all. And it was quite happy to do that. So we used to fill up full fuel, put a tank as well, and so that gave us about 3 hours endurance, and three of us, and one bottle of oxygen between the three of us, and we get airborne, and then climb up to. We used to pick an area, and 2 helicopters in formation, almost loose formation, and go up and down, looking for this AN-12.
Wow.
And the scenery is wow. And our height was only 500 AGL,
Right.
just
Oh,
500
boy.
AGL. We are at 20,000, 21,000, and the service ceiling is 18,000.
Oh.
So you can imagine we had no capability. We had no capability of hovering or anything. So if one of us went down, the other would only know where they are. That's all. They can't do anything.
Not able to do anything. Yeah.
Yeah, it is quite an incredible. We were very fortunate. We were there for 6 weeks or so. It was more a PR exercise than anything else, And it had like a handle. Olden days 50s cars. You turn
Crank.
the handle, turn the engine,
Yeah.
and if your battery gone down, you could put the handle there and turn it. And once it happened, I was in Kulu, coming back from Kelong. We used to land in Kulu. Kulu is full of fruits and everything. So I used to land in Kulu, fill up my helicopter with apples and all the other fruits, and then go to Chandigarh and Sasawa and distribute it to whoever wanted them. And so once we had landed there and shut down, and we came in, and our battery was down.
Oh.
It has very small voltage left. So we asked the army soldiers, "Can you turn this for us?" They said, "Okay." So they were very brave guys. They turning it and and it was wonderful. We were able to start the engine. It was incredible, absolutely incredible. But lovely helicopter. And as I said, its original life was only 3,000 hours. And then it had to go back to BRD and do the full maintenance and stuff like that. All the parts of the helicopter had very little life,
Okay.
But mainly because they were learning from us whether it can survive more than 3,000 or not, and maybe afterward they must have made it 5,000 or whatever,
Yeah. I think this is part of the Russian philosophy: shorter life with their frequent inspections. I think even the MiGs and things like that, they say they're designed the same way.
Yeah.
So what sorts of missions were you flying out of the Espers?
I was originally in Bell 47s once we went back from here, and once the Me-4s came, we started flying Me-4s. Then we flew Me-4s all over Himalayas, everywhere. We were basically looking after the civil government and the army, along the Himalayas. Absolutely the best flying you can ever do, fly over Himalayas. I did that for nearly 8-9 years. It was wonderful.
Right. Give me an example of the sorts of missions you were tasked with.
Yeah, mainly taking army soldiers in and bringing the people going on holidays, and same with the civil government officials who were there.
Okay.
Used to take them
Uh-huh.
in, civil servants, and bring them out. And
Hmm.
any casuacs, if anybody's sick or injured, you pick them up
Right.
and bring them back. Or
Hmm.
rations. Often we used to take a lot of rations for them. I remember once we landed at an army camp, and this guy was the major. They said, "Sir, हमारा एक soldier is not well, and they had gone on a recce, and they're about 15-20 minutes flying time. Can you go and pick him up?" I said, "No
Hmm.
problem." So we were already about 7 or 8,000 feet. So we going up this valley. I didn't even notice at my altimeter. So we
Hmm.
reached about 11,000 feet. And then I saw this little edge they had marked for us. So we
Wow.
landed that at the edge, and I realized that I had no power to get airborne from
Oh
there.
my goodness. Wow.
And of course, we picked up the soldier, and we picked up an attendant who was with him. And there was
Hmm.
a strip about not strip, I mean open space, about 600 yards roughly. So I went to
Hmm.
the edge, complete edge, sat down on the ground, pulled up full power, pushed it all the way forward, and ran like hell, hovering along the 600 yards, so that I can hit transition. And there were
Wow.
tall, tall trees at the other end. So when I reached the 600 yards, I yanked back like hell on my cyclic,
Huh.
and pulled my power. See, it's got a collective. After 8.5 degrees of collective,
Hmm.
the RPM starts dropping.
Hmm.
The
Correct.
rotor RPM,
Right.
because the drag is too much.
Drag is too
Up
much.
to eight
Right.
and a half degrees, you're okay.
Hmm.
But we can go up to 14 degrees. So if you go quickly to 14 degrees, it'll jump up into the air like a
Uh-huh.
like a rocket. And
Right.
then that I climbed up right on top. Anyway,
Right.
I went to the top, and I managed to cross the trees.
Hmm.
And and I was very, very fortunate. We must have missed the trees by an inch or 2 inches or something. As
Oh.
so
Okay.
I climbed up from there, and I must have missed a heartbeat or one or two heartbeats. And yeah, when I got back to the army camp, it took me 3 or 4 approaches before I could land, because I was so scared or something. Anyway, we managed to land okay, no problem at all.
Wow. And so you flew out of Tezpur for how many years and which
Three
airline?
Tezpur, I went for just for training, and then I
Hmm.
was posted to Chabua in
Okay.
in
Right.
105
Wow.
helicopters. So I was there for
Okay.
about 3 years, and then I got posted. Of course, we were flying in the Himalaya. Then I got posted to Sarsawa, and we started
Right.
the new helicopter unit called 116 helicopters.
116. Okay.
And KK Dev was my CO. What a wonderful guy! And there was nothing else. Everything was brand new. We had no in files and no out files. We just put one file in and one file out, and that was it. And it was just good fun. And everybody who joined me had a great time. And
Right.
of course, we took part in the Republic Day fly past as well, 2 years running. It,
Fascinating.
it, it is wonderful. We were the leaders of the 170 odd aircraft which used to come. So
Oh,
helicopters were the slowest. So we used to be in the front.
well, I'm going to digress a little here. It just fascinates me how you all manage the timings around that. What's the secret?
We used to do a lot of practice. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, every different aircraft had is a holding pattern. They were all holding outside the invisible area, about 3-4 miles away or 5 miles away. And
Right.
then they were told, okay, helicopters, me force, you come in first, and somebody else will come in next, and somebody else comes
Hmm.
in next. Somebody was
Wow.
obviously coordinating on the ground, telling
Hmm.
everybody, okay, your turn now, your turn now.
Right.
And then of course you keep people watching people in front of you, uh,
Uh-huh.
and then you just follow them. That was a
Amazing.
wonderful. The whole experience was wonderful. We used to be there for no more than a week, practicing all the
Right.
time.
Uh-huh. And you were operating out of Palam at that time, is it?
Pa- uh, Palam we used to go to Palam or Saftajang. I don't remember where it was.
Savdajang. Okay.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Maybe the helicopters were in Saftajang.
And so then you came back to the east in the run up to the 71 ups?
After I was there for 3 years in Sarsawa, then I came to Kumbigram in '69. Sorry, yeah, '69, yeah, '69 or '70, '69, something like that. Yeah.
S1Ep17, Roger, report time southeast, Greenwich, 364, Summit Wave, and fuel still active.
So, give us a sense for what the mood was like leading up to the 71 ops, and when did you get a sense that you're going to have to see action?
Our main job in 110 helicopters at Kumigram was to look after Mizo Hills and Nagaland and all that area. But there were so many units. 105 was in Chabua and we were in Kumbhikram, and in between Tezpur was also there. Somebody was in Tezpur as well, and so everybody's looking after. But our main job was Mizo Hills. A lot of Mizo Hills problems are going on all the time. So and of course General Sagat Singh was there anyway. He had come there to Mizo Hills. He was looking after Mizo Hills at that time.
Right.
Yeah. So we used to spend a lot of time with Assam Rifles and of course with other people. And we used to often stay overnight at Aizawl and places like that.
Right.
And what VIP treatment we used to get. Absolutely wonderful. And all youngsters.
Right.
I was 30 that time, and everybody else was much younger, and some of the senior pilots got shunted out to go training on Mi-8s. So I had even more younger people come in. Some of them were not even 20 at that time. They just passed out and come straight to us.
Wow.
So, and I was not even qualified flying instructor,
Right.
and the only flying instructor we had was our CEO Sandhu. And so myself and Jaya Raman was the other guy who was with me. And both of us were not QFIs at that time. So we used to train all these youngsters. We were authorized by the CEO to train them.
Right.
And
Wow.
of course, we needed to get them instrument rating, so we had to send them to Chabua, and they got the instrument rating there and night flying rating there, etc. And by that time, and we were doing a lot of night flying practice in from September 71 onwards to so that people get used to flying at night as well, and low level flying. A lot of low level flying we used to do. It was all, and everybody was loving it because it was something different and something exciting. It was just wonderful. And of course, we could see the war was going on because we could hear on the news, and casualties we used to be picking up because our army was involved quite heavily from the east, and the FOCO was quite heavily involved. They were going in from the east and trying to capture whatever little things they could capture.
Did you have refugees in your area?
There must have been. I don't know. We didn't get involved with them because army was looking after the refugees as well, and they were picking up the able-bodied people and training them, to become
Mukti
Mukti
Bahini.
Bahini.
Yeah. Right. So, give us a sense for what it was like on the eve of the war. How large was the fleet under your?
No, we had 10 helicopters in 110. So we were asked to disperse them when the official war started on 3rd of December because they thought sabers might come and attack Kumbhikram and destroy our helicopters. So we sent some helicopter to Aizawl and some helicopter somewhere else, and some to Talimara where FOCO headquarters was. And then 3rd of December when the war started, we a third or fourth or fifth, all our job was basically CASVAC and taking the army generals around wherever they wanted to go, and and supplying arms and ammunition and food and stuff like that.
So your tasking came from the army. What was the?
Army was there, and Group Captain Chandan Singh was there. Group Captain Chandan Singh was basically sent there to look after Kilo unit. Kilo unit was made to train the Bangladesh Air Force pilots who are deserted from the Pakistan Air Force. So we had an Otter and a Dakota and a Elvet there to train them, and so he was with them basically. And if by default he took over rest of the Air Force operation because he was the senior most over there. So we came under him.
Okay, so tell us, once operation started, what was the?
So 3rd, 4th, and 5th of December, as I said, our job was just casualty evacuation, taking the generals around, and supplying arms and ammunition and food to whoever wanted them. And on the 7th of December, Sagat Singh decided that we'll take over Sylhet. So they discussed what we're going to do. Kailashar is a place about 100 kilometers, 100 miles or so from Agartala. So we said we'll all go to Kailashar, and from there we'll operate to Sylhet. And Kailashar has an old Second World War strip. and one of the Dakotas, which was with the Chandan Singh, uh, kill of light, he was told to go and get fuel for us. So he went to Agatala and Kumbigram, wherever he could get drums of fuel, and he positioned a lot of fuel for us at Kailashar. And then we picked a place called Kalora, which is about 6-7 minutes flying from Kailashar, which is in East Bangladesh. And from there, our aim was to go to Sylhet. So this is on 7th of December. We had selected the fields. These are all paddy fields. They're all been cut and cleaned, and
Right.
they had been harvested. So they were open
Right.
spaces.
Uh-huh.
And Sylhet, we did the same. Only thing, Sylhet, we found a space away from their cantonment and railway station and everything, so that we don't come under the army fire from them.
Right.
So that is the plan. At 7th morning, 9 o'clock, we got ready to do that, and the Indian Army was not ready for us, and then by the time they started coming, it was about 2:30.
Oh,
And in December, in the east, it gets dark quite quickly. About 5:30,
right.
quarter to 6 is dark.
So you're
So
sitting on the ground in Kalora waiting for them.
yeah, we got there about midday at Kalora, and at 9 o'clock we were at Kailashar. Midday we went to Kalora, and we were waiting for them. And 2:30, and I'd briefed all the helicopters. We had 8 helicopters. One we kept for Kazawak, and 7 we were going to operate. And five of them belonged to my unit, and 3 helicopters joined us from 105 HU, which is from Chabua. And
Right.
so we had 8 helicopters, and as I said, one we kept for Kazawaks, and 7 of us we were going to operate. And we had enough fuel to do 3 trips each. And so I'd briefed everybody. As soon as the passengers come, we load them up and get airborne. And we had numbers given. I was number 1, number 2, number 3. So every helicopter had a number. And aim was to stay 3-4 minutes behind each other, so that only one helicopter lands at Sylhet at any one time.
Correct.
And that's what we did. As soon as they came, about 2:30 onward, they started coming. So I loaded up my helicopter, got airborne, went to Sylhet, dropped them. The second helicopter was 3 or 4 minutes behind me.
Now tell me, sir, Sylhet was completely in Pakistani control at that time. So you were flying into.
Everything. Yeah. In Kalora, there was no Pakistanis, because there was no, nothing was happening there. Luckily for us, and so nobody was disturbing us. But Sylhet was definitely 1.5 battalion of army in Pakistan army was there. So we picked a helipad away from them, about 5 or 6 kilometers from the railway station, and about 10 kilometers from the cantonment. And there's a river there, Suma River, and there are bridges there. They're well guarded. So we were away from them. So that away from the small arm fire, basically. So as I said, each helicopter was 4 minutes behind, or 3-4 minutes behind the other. So by the time I came back to pick up my next load, the last helicopter had just got airborne. And it was 20 minutes one way. 20 minutes one way. So I came back at.
But after they hear the first helicopter or see the first helicopter, they would rush their forces to that landing area. And
Yeah, that's what they were doing. They started surrounding the field, but our armies, Gurkhas that we were dropping, 4-5 Gurkhas, they started firing back at them, and
pushing them back.
by the time Pakistan army realized what was going on, we had already done about 7 or 8 landings,
Okay.
before they started surrounding us. So we had about 50-60 soldiers already there, and they started making our field secure,
Okay.
so that make sure that no Pakistani armies come close to us. So they had spread out all around the field, and they were keeping them at bay. So I came back.
So by the time you returned for your second trip, you must have encountered some fire there.
Yeah, when I went back with my second flight, we could see a lot of tracer bullets. Lots and lots of tracer bullets are coming towards us. Hundreds of them, literally. And Chandan Singh and Singla was the pilot for the Albert 3. He's my co-mate as well. So he and Chandan Singh, they were both at about 5 or 6,000 feet, keeping an eye on us.
Oh.
And they were armed. The Albert was armed. And in the first rotation, we had dropped one flying officer, Sharma, as a liaison officer with the army. So he was guarding them and telling them where to shoot to knock off the guns of the Pakistani armies. So every now and then, the Albert was shooting at those guns as well, to keep them low. So by the time, as I said, I went the second time, the Pakistan army was firing at us, and then I came back, and by the time I went the third time, The
Mm.
bullets were wow. When you see a tracer bullet, means another 4 or 5 bullets are coming behind it.
Correct, correct, correct.
So
Mm.
thousands and thousands of bullets are coming towards us. Of course, if
Oh.
if I can see 1,000, Chandan Singh could see 10,000. Because he's
Mm.
watching the whole show.
Right.
So by the time he came back after our third rotation, it was in 5:30, quarter to 6, and we shut
Mhm.
down, and then we went to Kalasha to refuel to get ready for the next rotation.
Right.
So one of the helicopters had not come back, and the engineers told me, sir, one helicopter is missing. So I called him up on the radio, and he said, I've lost, tell me where to come. So we fired a
Mm.
flare for him. He was in the next valley, so he
Okay.
saw the flare and came over and landed. So that I don't remember
Fascinating.
the name of the guy.
Right.
Anyway, we refueled, we got ready, and then
Sorry, can I just, when you're approaching a landing ground, you're concentrating on the landing, and then there's this barrage of, trace of fire.
yeah.
What is going on in your mind, and what do? You just press ahead and hope for the best, and
No, nobody was bothered. No, I mean, it didn't even occur to me that any of those bullets are going to hit me.
right.
It was just like the
Mm.
movies. When you saw the Second World War movies. Nobody even imagined that anything going to hit us. And I don't remember anybody feeling scared
Mm.
or anybody saying I'm not going in or anything
Wow.
like that. Everybody just kept going.
Right. Hmm.
Because the job had to be done. And nobody,
Hmm.
literally
Wow.
nobody said I'm not flying. and
Mm.
and of course when we shut
Mm.
down and refueled and got ready, and we saw an odd bullet hole here and there, and
Wow.
the engineers went just put a patch on them,
Mm.
and the engines were working fine, the aircraft was working fine,
Hmm.
and we got ready about
Right.
6:15 to start the operation again, and we had
Hmm.
dropped about 254 people, soldiers, and then we had dropped the 400-500 kilograms of their whatever equipment they had, and of course they had not planned who's going to go first, who's going to
Right.
go
Right.
second.
Right.
They thought we'll just keep
Hmm.
going, until everything is delivered. So when the Chandan Singh said no
Mm.
flying because you'll all be
Mm.
sitting ducks and you'll all be shot down. And Brigadier Quinn, I think his name was, he was very upset. He says, how can you drop 250 people and then just stop firing? Just because it is night doesn't mean the war stops. The war is
Right.
carrying on.
Right. Right.
And of course they had 1.5 battalion of Pakistan army. The 5 or 6 thousand people,
Mm.
soldiers were there, Pakistani,
Mm.
and
Mm.
we
Mm.
only dropped 250. Only thing
Correct.
good in our favor was that Pakistan didn't know how many people we had dropped because
Right.
we were landing all the time. They didn't know how many people we had dropped.
Mm.
So from about 6:15, 6:30 till about 11,
Mm.
the army and the air force kept discussing. He says if Chandan Singh's argument was that if I send the helicopter, it gets shot down, we lose a helicopter, we lose soldiers, we lose the pilots. What is the advantage? There's no
Mm.
advantage, you know.
Right.
And at night, the helicopter will be a sitting duck.
Mm.
So eventually they decided, okay, let's send one helicopter and see what happens.
Mm.
And if it comes back, then we'll start the operation.
Right.
And so he came to me, Chandan Singh came to me, he says, Vaid, I want one crew and get one helicopter ready, and we'll see what happens. And
Mm.
if it comes back, then we'll start the operation. I said, okay. So I went to the crew room, like a crew room. It was like a hall in the airport.
Right.
Everybody was just lying down trying to catch whatever sleep we could get, because we were working 24/7. There was no time for
Mm.
sleeping or eating or anything.
Right. Right. Mm.
So I went there. I said, I need one pilot to come with me.
Mm.
Everybody put their hand up. It was absolutely amazing. Everybody
Mm.
knew the bullets that were
Wow.
coming.
Right.
Everybody knew. Everybody had
Mm.
seen them. So I picked up flying officer ready, and we got we the people we had dropped, they had not even taken their HF radios with them, so we had no
Wow.
contact with them.
No contact. Wow.
Absolutely no contact. So so first thing, we put radios in the helicopter, we put more ammunition, we put more food. They had very little water in the front, so we put a lot of water for them. And so
Mm.
we put all the essential equipment, and another 8, 9 or 10 soldiers that took, and we got airborne about midnight on the 8th of December, the 7th, 8th
Mm.
morning. And I got airborne, and of course it was pitch dark, and of course daytime we could see the.
So navigation must have been really difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, navigation wise, I had only one compass, and I had 20 minutes of flying time, and that is it, nothing else.
Wow.
And I actually didn't even know Flying Officer Sharma was there, the liaison officer. So only when
Mm.
he heard the helicopter, he came up on the radio. About bloody time you buggers came, what took you so long and everything? Because they were panicking over
Oh,
there.
right.
So
Right.
they would have been annihilated completely.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah.
the Pakistan army had any sense, they would have come
Mm.
straight in with all their arms and ammunition and thrashed the
Mm.
hell out of them.
Yep.
Anyway, they were very fortunate because I think Pakistan had been scared so much, they didn't come in at all. And of course, when he told me about time, of course, helicopter was, I knew what it looked like in daytime. I had no idea what it looked like at night time. I didn't know how I was going to find it even. As I said, all I had was a compass and 20 minutes. There's no GPS in those days.
No GPS.
And so luckily this flying officer came up. He says, about time you came and everything. And I said, what is the situation like on the ground? He says, no, everything is quiet. Our army is keeping them at bay. And I'll light a fire for you. So he lit a fire for us, one Gurkha soldier.
Did the Me-4 have a floodlight? Could you turn on a floodlight of some sort?
Yeah, but if you light a floodlight, you're going to get shot.
You're going to get shot, right? Okay.
Even if I put the floodlight, what am I going to look at? I must know where to go.
Yeah.
So he lit a fire for me. And as soon as he lit a fire, I can imagine right in the middle of the battlefield, you light a fire. What happens? The Pakistan army started firing at that poor soldier, and he got hit on his thumb. He lost his thumb.
Okay.
And of course, our oddly they tied him up on the thumb, and I brought him back. He didn't want to come back. He wanted to go and kill that idiot who had hit him. He didn't want to come back. So anyway, he lighted the fire. As soon as I saw the fire, I knew where to go, because I would have landed maybe in the enemy territory even. If
correct.
I didn't know where to go.
Yeah.
And even if I dropped them 2 miles away, these 8-9 soldiers would have been a liability to everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I needed to go to the same place where we had gone in the first place.
Perfect.
So once the fire was lit, I went straight in, landed there, and my briefing to my soldiers was that as soon as I land, I want everybody out. I'm going to be airborne in 10 seconds. And so within a minute, we were airborne. And the amount of bullets which came towards us.
And these are soldiers who've never been in a helicopter before, so they're not like special forces who are used to this, but they had.
No, most of them had been in the helicopters.
Okay, so they're comfortable with how to
Most
get
of the
in
Indian
and out.
army, most of the Indian army soldiers have been in the helicopters. Yeah. So as soon as I landed, they jumped out, and amount of bullets I saw coming towards me, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. Now I'm sure we'll have bullet holes everywhere.
Right.
So anyway, we landed, we dropped everybody, got airborne, and we had a flight engineer. His job was to coordinate and drop and pick up passengers. So the pilots just stay in the cockpit; they don't get out. So as soon as I got airborne and I set course back, I told my flight engineer, go and have a look how many bullet holes we got. So he went with the lights on, put the torch on, went everywhere, and he discovered after about 3 or 4 minutes, he came back with a big smile. He says, "Sir, you won't believe it. We don't have a single bullet hole." I just could not believe.
Wow.
I just could not believe that we had no bullet hole at all. And so I got hold of Kailashar, our base. I said, "Come on, guys, these people don't know how to fire. We're all going in. So you start getting ready." So I came running back, picked up my next load, went all the way running back, dropped my next load, again got airborne, set course back, again with no bullet holes, came running back, picked up my third load, went running in, dropped my third load, got airborne, and this time a fuel gauge was showing 0. So obviously some bullet had come in.
Boy.
And but the engine was running, the rotors were running, and so obviously we had fuel. So we were praying to whoever was because the engine's running, rotors running, so obviously fuel is running somewhere,
Right, yeah.
And so with whoever we were just praying to whoever was up there, take us back home, because we didn't want to land in the enemy territory on the way back,
Correct.
So we came back and landed. In the meantime, 4 helicopters had got ready, and they were they were all at Kalora. And we had a jerry can, so my engineer went to each helicopter, put fuel from there into my jerry can and put it in our helicopter. So at least we had 50-60 liters of fuel, so we can go back to Kailashar to pick up more fuel, And then the engineers had a look inside, and they discovered that one bullet had come in and chopped up the cable going to the fuel gauge.
Okay.
So they changed the cable, and it started working fine. And it is. So I just joined the rest of the squadron. So what I discovered was that the Pakistan army couldn't see us at night.
Right.
They could hear us.
They could hear you.
So when they were so they were firing just at the noise. So obviously they were missing us.
Right.
And so after that, we were 5 helicopters. It kept going whole night. And we dropped another 150 odd soldiers and ammunition and food and whatever. And even in the middle of the night, a whole day, next day, 9th, we were doing the same operation. And of course, bullets were coming from every direction. An odd helicopter will come back with 1 or 2 bullet holes, and somebody will come back with 4 or 5 bullet holes. I think one soldier died in one of the helicopters when the bullet came in and
Wow.
killed the poor soldier. But rest of the time, majority of, I would say, 99.9% of us had no problem at all. Just few bullet holes every now and then we used to get. Just Pakistani, even in daytime they couldn't fire at us because our army was keeping them further away and further and further away. Our army kept spreading out. As we
Right.
dropped more and more soldiers, they kept spreading out. And also the Mukti Bhani people were also with us. And they were guiding us, and they were helping us, and they were helping the army
Right.
to tell them which area to go and which area to thrash and things like that. And of course, the fighters were coming in, the Nats and the hunters during the daytime, and they were playing up havoc into them as well.
Okay.
Into Pakistan. And caribous and Dakotas used to come and drop whatever food was required by our soldiers in Sylhet area. Caribou came, and on the 9th morning, middle of the night, I was told to take artillery. We took some artilleries and mortars
Wow.
right in the middle of the night and dropped them, and that of course helped our army to keep firing back at them. And about a week later, 5,000 soldiers surrendered to our about 1,000 of our soldiers.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
Amazing.
Absolutely incredible.
Visual Chinook on before the bridge line. Just need 70, Roger, report diving southeast, Sqn for midway, and yield selected.
So your, this incredible activity of very quickly transporting the troops, across that terrain, I think really opened General Sagat's eyes to the possibility of air power, the helicopter.
Correct. See, when he saw how quickly we could move everybody, he was very impressed. Very, very impressed. So he told Chanan Singh, okay, let's go and cross Meghna now.
Right.
So we came back to Agatala. On the 9th, we came back to Agatala. By about 9 in the morning, we started coming back. By 11, everybody was back at Agatala. And on the 9th morning. And so he said, we'll go to Raipur. Raipur was just across from Agatala. So Brahmanbari is the place we selected from this side of the Meghna River, and Raipur was going to be the other side, just about 20-25 kilometers away.
Right.
I can send you all the charts and everything.
No, I'd love to.
With the maps.
No, definitely.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. And so we at about 11ish, Sagat Singh told me and my CO, let's go in a little helicopter, and I'll show you where I want you guys to land at Raipur. So he took us to Raipur area, which is across the river, and 25 kilometers from Brahmanbaria. Brahmanbaria is another 20 miles from Agatala. And so we went. So he showed us around, and on the way back, there's a river, of course, Meghna River. There was a coronation bridge on it,
Right.
and Pakistan Army had blown up that bridge. And so Chanan Singh said, let's go in that area, have a look what's going on, and let's see what my 18 Bihar and Assam rifles, one of the Gurkhas were there, 4 Gurkhas, I think, were there. I'll go and see what these guys are doing, So we went in that area, and then he told the pilot that this area below us is under Indian control, so we can go down.
Right.
So we started coming down to 1,000 feet. And suddenly we heard this foot noise, and the bullets were going right through the helicopter. And one of the pilots got hit on his shoulder, and the bullet went through the shoulders and went into the backrest and stopped there. And I was sitting right behind him, right behind the backrest, about 3 feet behind, and the bullet stopped for 3 feet in front of me.
My goodness.
So, and then the co-pilot took over, climbed away very quickly, and we came back and landed. And we discovered later on that it was our own army, thinking it is a Pakistani helicopter who were firing at us. And the other thing we discovered, we had 38 bullet holes in that helicopter. 38, and at least 20 bullets must have gone through that helicopter.
Wow. And didn't touch anything vital, huh?
6 of us were in that helicopter, only 1 person was injured. Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. So anyway, we came back, we got ready, our planning was done, our refueling was done, and we positioned ourselves at Brahmanbaria, from where the our Indian army was going to come. And by the time they came, it was nearly 4 o'clock, and So as soon as I had 8 helicopters at that time, and we had picked 2 helipads a kilometer apart on Raipur, so
Hmm.
that 4 helicopters can operate to one helipad and another 4 can operate to the other side.
Right.
So that is our planning. And so when we landed at Brahmabaria, we shut down and we looked outside near the riverside. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bodies, dead bodies lying there.
Oh my
So we
goodness.
asked the local people, "Kya hua? What happened here?"
Mm.
And he says that this stupid Pakistani army rounded up everybody and killed them
Wow.
just at random. Even the POWs they had captured, they just killed everybody
Hmm.
and ran away from there.
Wow.
So anyway, when our army started, my helicopters, I had number 1, 2, 3, 4, and right
Mm.
side was number 1, 2, 3, 4. So they were doing the right side, and I was doing the left side.
Right.
And I loaded up my helicopter. I had Chandan Singh with me, and there's a gentleman called Major Chandrakant who was in charge of the army side of it.
Mm.
He was in my group, and one flying officer I was taking,
Hmm.
and he was the liaison officer.
Mm.
So we landed at Raipur, and we dropped them, and I was just going to get airborne and pulling up my cyclic, and in my mind something came, just wait for another 30 seconds.
Hmm.
So I stopped. I didn't climb. I didn't take off. And then my briefing to my pilots was that if you by mistake misjudge your landing, just land on the side or slow down and land for 50 seconds later
Mm.
if the first helicopter is still on the ground.
Right.
But this guy behind me
Ah.
made a mistake, and he was overshooting, and he overshot right on top of me.
Ah.
So if I had pulled up at that time, I would have gone straight into
Oh
him.
my goodness.
So my instinct
Sixth
told me,
sense.
to stop, don't get airborne, don't get
Right.
airborne.
Uh-huh.
So I waited for about 30, 40 seconds, and then I saw this helicopter go right on top of me.
Whew.
So anyway, the whole night, whole afternoon, whole evening, whole night we were flying and carrying on dropping the soldiers.
How many sorties do you think you flew that?
Oh, I think we must have done nearly 100 sorties,
Wow.
between the 8 helicopters.
So you all must have been dead tired and
No,
hungry
nobody
and
bothered. Nobody cared. Nobody cared about sleeping. Nobody cared about eating or anything. We never even thought about it. We used to eat food whenever we went to Agartala. Agartala
fascinating.
had food. So we used to go to Agartala
Mm-hmm.
regularly to get fuel. So after every 2.5 hours
Mm-hmm.
or 3 hours, we'll be going to Agartala and have refueling, and the engineers will look over the helicopter and everything and
Mm.
make sure it is serviceable
Right.
before we went back for our next operation. And then it's the same night. I think it is a 10th night or something. 3 in the morning, one of the helicopters comes up on the radio. Sir, I got no passengers. The second one says I got no passengers. Third one says I got no passengers. Fourth one says I got no passengers. So I said, okay, let's shut down. We've been flying for 2 hours. Let's shut down and see what's going on. So I met one colonel there, and I said, "Sir, kya ho raha hai? What's the problem?" He says, "I want all the 8 helicopters for myself." I said, "I'm not going to give you all the 8 helicopters yourself. We are coming back in bloody 10 minutes. What is the big deal? You use these 4 helicopters, and then from then on, you'll get all the 8 helicopters. So he understood what I was telling him,
Mm.
and then of course, then we kept operating the whole night and next morning as well, and kept dropping everybody. So after the Raipura was finished, we came back to Agatala and we started, getting the aircraft serviceable. And then Sagat Singh said, "That's absolutely wonderful, you guys did. Let's go to Narasingdi, which is even closer to Dhaka. So in the meantime, the people we had dropped at Raipura, they set course to Narasingdi so that to make Narasingdi secure for us. And Narasingdi was about 40 kilometers away, towards Dhaka. So that's what we did.
Right. Mm.
That evening, we positioned ourselves at Brahmabari again, and rest of the army started coming. And next day, first thing in the morning, we started at 5:30, and we were flying. And then another 2 helicopters joined us from 111 helicopters from Hashimara. So by the time we had 12 helicopters, or even 14 at one point. So we kept flying the whole day and the whole evening, the whole night, and as I said, every time we came to Agatala, we used to have lunch or breakfast or dinner, whatever food was available, and then just get back into it. And whoever was not flying would go and rest. And if somebody, and I used to keep swapping them around so that everybody gets half an hour rest, half an hour rest, half an hour rest. So that people get some 40 wings wherever there was
Yeah,
chance.
because a misjudgment. There'll be a helicopter full of soldiers who will lose their lives if they make a mistake, right? And they're really tired at this point.
And and whenever army needed us to go and pick up casualties, we used to send helicopters to pick up casualties or supply of arms and ammunition and food or whatever. So we used to go back and deliver all those things, and then come back and get on with it with our flying. But casualty evacuation and supplying of ammunition and arms always took priority. This other thing. So once we had Narasingdi, I think we did about 150 odd flights to Narasingdi, and then again we came back, and again Sagat Singh was so impressed. He wanted another brigade to move from Dadakindi to another place. It's in the maps there, and so we got ready for that. I'll give you the dates as well. Around the 12th, I think,
Right.
and then after we finished our Narasingdi, we had carried nearly 100,000 kilos and 1,330 passengers to Narasingdi. 164 sorties we did. I'm just looking at the paper I got in front of me.
Fascinating.
And then we got positioned to Dadakindi at 0730 on the 14th of December, and we were going to go to Badya Bazar, which is nearer to Dhaka.
Right.
And the soldiers only started arriving at 10:30 because they were all got caught up in the marshy areas. So once they started arriving, then by the time the whole area was under the Indian Army control, so there was no opposition.
Right.
Then we used to fly together, 4 helicopters at a time. So I had 12 helicopters at that time. So 4 helicopters at a time we were flying and landing at various places and dropping everything. So we must have done 100 flights on that day as well, on the 14th of December.
Wow, fascinating.
And we dropped nearly 900 soldiers and 22,000 kilograms of load and stuff like that. And now on 15th of December we continued the same thing. We carried the rest of the people and dropped everybody there, and we did 122 sorties for them from that area. So now Dhaka was completely covered from our side, from the eastern side, and we started firing our own. Colonel Bhal was the first. We even carried guns, our own guns, artillery guns. They were broken up into pieces, and they assembled them when we dropped them, and then Colonel Bhal was the first one who started firing at them once the guns were assembled. And on the 15th of December, we started hearing the news that the surrender is going to take place, and General Jacob had already negotiated with the Niazi. He told Niazi that if you don't surrender, we're just going to shoot you down. You'll be dead. So if you surrender, at least you can save all your soldiers, because our Indian Air Force was thrashing the hell out of them.
Yeah, I think 14th is when the attack on Government House by 28 Squadron and 27
Correct.
Squadron.
Correct. They were going to have a meeting at the government house, and one of our fighters came and hit them just at the time when the meeting is going to start. And the governor just gave up. He says, I resign. I don't want to be here."
Fascinating. And so at that time, you were tasked with carrying some journalists, I was told.
Yes, once the surrender ceremony was announced, then the 16th morning, we all started getting ready to go for the surrender ceremony, and all the VIPs, the generals and the admirals and the Air Force air marshals and all, they all went in the Alvet, and the ceremony was going to take place around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and so everybody from all the journalists were sitting in Calcutta, so they all took Averos and from Guwahati and all. They all ended up in Agartala, because the only way to go to Dhaka was by helicopters, and all the helicopters were in Agartala. So I think 6 or 7 Alvets were there. They took all the VIPs, and I was told to take 5 ME4s to take all the reporters. And we still had not put the clamshell door. I don't know why we didn't put the clamshell door. I think it was maybe had no time or whatever the reason. So clamshell door was still not there. And also remember, never had any manifest. Nobody write down anybody's names. We never had any loads. We didn't know what loads we were carrying. We were just estimating. All these figures I've given are just estimated. My estimate is we carried more than 6,000 soldiers and more than 202
Wow.
tons of equipment. In
My
one
goodness.
week, on from the 8th of December to 15th of December, in one week, that is the figures we had carried. That is quite incredible, absolutely incredible. You know, and again, it could be more than that. Because we were not keeping any manifest. Nobody was writing down anybody's name, and there was no time or facility available. And our load was supposed to be only 14 passengers at a time, but we were carrying 20, 22, 23. Doesn't matter. As long as you can fill them in, we'll go. And we were just coaxing the helicopter to get airborne, and the MEFOs were incredible. They never let us down. And my engineers, wow, what wonderful engineers we had.
No, I was thinking about that. Your serviceability must have been fantastic because all aircraft were flying 10, 12, 15 sorties a day.
All the time, all the time they were flying, and we had about 7 or 8 engineers and about 60 or technicians, 60 or technicians, but they kept everybody flying, and not a single helicopter got injured or grounded for
Mm-hmm.
any reason. Nothing was grounded or kept on the ground. Everybody was flying. Everybody was flying. you know so when we got ready to go to Dhaka on the 16th, the uh, Chandan Singh had told me only the pilots flying will go. Pilots who are not flying will stay at home, because we want to carry as many reporters as possible. I said yes, sir, but I didn't agree with him because I said we have put our life on the line. We had put, we worked 24/7 for so many days. This is once in a lifetime celebration, and I didn't want anybody to miss. So I had 20 pilots and engineers. I loaded them first, inside before I put the reporters in. And I said, maximum air commander will tell me off later on. I said, I'll listen to that. I said, I have no problem. So I took all my pilots and all my engineers so that they can go on. And engineers mean all the people who are flying with us. So 20 of them
Yeah.
I smuggled before I put the reporters in, and I took them in. And one of them was Krutz, who Krishnamurti, who's standing over Jacob's head, Jacob's shoulder, looking at the signatures. He was one of the spare pilots. He was not even supposed to be there. It was incredible. We reached there about 4 o'clock, and there were cars and
Mm-hmm.
vehicles and trucks and buses and even bullock carts and cycles and all the Bengalis were ready to give us a hand and give us a hug and shake hands with us and thank you very much. And wow, it was incredible. And they took us to the Medan, and we saw the ceremony. And I think it was quite late in the evening when we returned. I don't know how we came back. I don't even remember how we came back to the airport. Yeah, it was like the movies. When the American troops went into Paris, and uh, all the wonderful things that they were doing. Same thing was happening there. It was an absolutely incredible experience. Absolutely incredible.
Visual Chinook before the bridge landing. Just need 70, like your report time southeast, Sqn Ldr Vaid, and yield selected.
After the war, for nearly 6 weeks, I was in Dhaka and Bangladesh helping Sagat Singh, because Sagat Singh had taken over control of the whole of Bangladesh, and the Bangladesh government had started forming, and so I was helping Sagat Singh and the Bangladesh government, and we were in Chittagong and wherever the army wanted us to go. And we were so fortunate. We met Lata Mangeshkar, Vaida Rahman, and Sunil Dutt and Nargis. They had come to entertain the troops. Yeah, it was wonderful to see them. So and I'd met them before at Jaisalmer. They had come to shoot a movie called Reshma and Shera,
Okay.
and and Ashwini Kumar, he used to be the police chief. He knew Sunil Dutt quite well, and I was taking Ashwini Kumar and his wife on a tour of Rajasthan. When I was in when I was in Sarsaba. So we landed at Jaisalmer, and from there we went to the camp where the shooting was going on. The
Mhm.
shooting was in the desert,
Mm.
and we met Sunil Dutt and Vaidaraman, and we stayed there for 4 5 days with them. And and one of the scenes they were shooting was the actor dies and he's covered with sand. The sandstorm is coming and covering
Right.
his body with sand,
Oh,
and they were going to blow the sand onto the actor with the help of big fans.
uh-huh.
I said, I got a better fan than your fan. I'll use my helicopter to blow the sand for you. She said, okay. I said, only condition is don't show it in your movie because
Right.
otherwise I'll be bloody discharged from the Air Force.
Well,
So he said, okay, great idea. So I went and blew the sand for him, and he was so thrilled with it. And so I'd met them all. They always seem to travel together. Vedarman, Sunil Dutt, and Nargis, and so I met them again in Dhaka. They were so thrilled. I was so thrilled to see them, and they were so happy to see me as well. You know, and in Chittagong, I was given a Beetle, Volkswagen Beetle, for my transport,
wow.
and so Vedaraman and Nargis are standing there, and I said, I can give you a lift to the Madan. They were going for give the entertainment, so I had the privilege of giving them, a lift in my little Volkswagen Beetle.
Oh, nice.
It was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But during the war, we met them everywhere. We met Ladakh, Keshkar, and everywhere. They used to go everywhere, all over the place. They used to go for entertaining, and so 6 weeks we spent there. It was wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
So if we can change gears now to your post Air Force flying career, you moved to Scotland and then began flying Chinooks in the British Isles to the North Sea platforms. And,
Yeah, I see. What happened in the Indian Air Force after the war got over, I got promoted to Sqn Ldr's rank, and they pushed me to NCC in Bhubaneswar. I was so pissed off. I said, after doing all the war and everything, what is NCC? What is this bullshit? As if I've been kicked out of the Air Force. So I was really, really pissed off. So I put in a resignation letter that I want to get out. Of course, nobody accepts your resignation letter. So, but my father-in-law knew the air chief at that time. So he rang up the air chief, and the air chief said, "Yeah, okay, I'll let your son-in-law go out." So I was very fortunate. He accepted my resignation and let me get out. So then I started writing to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, "Give me a job, give me a job." And the British Airways offered me a job if I came and got my British license. So I said, okay, no problem. I'll come over to UK and get my British license. That shouldn't be very difficult. So I flew. I came in November 1974 to UK and started doing I met the British Airways people and they saw my logbook and everything, and they were quite happy with whatever I had. And so I joined a school to do my training, for ground school and everything, and I passed my exams, and then I passed my flying exams with the civil aviation. So I got my ATPL by March. So I went and told British Airways I got my ATPL, I'm ready to fly. And for some reason, they decided that I was a foreigner. They had met me, they'd been corresponding with me and everything. So they said, we can't give you a job because you need a work permit to get a job. So now I was broke completely. I'd spent all the little money that I had. So I rang around and I found one as agency called Helicopters something. It's based in Red Hill, and there's a gentleman called Brown over there, Commodore Brown. So I spoke to him. So he knew somebody who was looking for helicopter pilots. So he rang up that gentleman called Peter Nutting. He told Peter Nutting, I got this pilot. He's got ATPL and he's looking for a job. Peter Nutting rang me up. He says, when can you start? I said, I can start yesterday. So he said, okay, catch so and so train and then meet me at Northampton. So I met him at Northampton, and they were doing crop spraying. So for 6 months, I did crop spraying with him, and he was very, very nice gentleman, absolutely wonderful gentleman. He managed to get me a work permit. He managed to get my wife and my son over from India. And so I worked with him for 6 months, and he was just wonderful. Then I wrote to British Airways. I said, "Listen, I got my work permit. Now can you give me a job?" So British Airways said, "Yeah, of course we can give you a job." So then after 6 months, I went and joined British Airways. It was in December 75. I started with British Airways. The North Sea had just started. I was number 58 in my company, seniority wise, and within 2 years we were 250 pilots. because it is expanding like hell. Because North Sea was just starting, and we're getting more and more helicopters. And so I was on the S61, Skorsky 61. We were
Okay.
flying.
Uh-huh.
So I flew them for what? No, no, 82, 82, 80. Yeah, 82. I went over to the Chinooks.
And you would fly to all these offshore platforms and take people and
Offshore
bring them
platforms.
back.
And for 1 year, I went to, yeah, Borneo, the north side of Borneo, which is an independent little state.
Brunei then.
Brunei. That's the one. Yeah, I was there for a year. It was like a holiday, for a whole year. We had no expenditure, and the flying, and the rigs were only 20 miles away from the base. 20, 25 miles. So we could see the rigs from the shore. And we used to do morning shift or afternoon shift, and the rest of the time we just used to have parties and enjoy ourselves completely, and no expenditure. Everything is paid for by Shell. You know, yeah, everything. The only thing we were spending money was on food. That's it. You know.
And flying in the North Sea, I mean, just sounds very scary, particularly in winter. The weather is really unpredictable.
Yeah, but the helicopters here were very, very sophisticated. They had all the latest equipment in them and GPS and not GPS, but it's kind of navigation system was there. Dacca was there earlier on, and then they had some other navigation system. And uh, after I came back from Brunei, I changed over to the Chinooks it's in 1982. And by the time my accident happened, I'd done 2,500 hours on it. In between, I was sent to Alaska.
Hmm.
There we had a contract there for about 6 months. In the Bering Sea, we had a rig, and they'd put an extra tank in the Chinook. Already we had 6 hours of endurance,
Wow,
and with the extra tank, we had another hour and a half. So 7.5 hours of endurance,
fascinating.
and we could still carry 21 passengers. So I spent. We used to go to Alaska for 6 weeks and come back, and then do another 6 weeks and come back. It was wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
Visual Chinook Fort Ridge West. Just need 70, like your report type southeast, Sqn Ldr Vaid, Vaid, and yield selected.
So tell us about the accident. So what?
I was back in Aberdeen, and we used to go to a place called Sambra, which is north of in Shetland Islands. It's in Shetland Islands. It's 150 miles north of Aberdeen, and from there the oil rigs, the Shell oil rigs, they are the Brent field is called. They got 4 rigs there: Brent Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, about just over 100 miles nautical miles from the from Sambra Airport. So our job, I went there on 3rd of November, Monday morning, and we were supposed to come back on Friday evening. So we spent Monday to Friday there,
Right.
and we had 2 sets of crew. One was the morning crew, and one was the afternoon crew. Morning crew did 2 flights, between 7 o'clock and 1 o'clock, and the afternoon crew did from 1 o'clock till they were on standby afterward, but they did only 1 flight. So total were 3 flights a day. And my co-pilot, Naval Nixon, his name was, he had he had been working with Bristow's before, and he left Bristow's about 3 years earlier and gone to help his wife Pauline to set up a chemist shop in York.
Hmm.
And after 3 years, the shop was running fine. So Pauline said, "You can go back to flying if you want to." So that's what he decided to come back and start flying again.
Hmm.
So he'd only just joined our company 6 months earlier, and then he had converted on to Chinooks, and so he was very keen to fly extra.
Hmm.
So on the 6th of November, he was rostered to do the afternoon shift. So he changed his duty with the morning co-pilot, and became my co-pilot because he wanted to do 2 flights rather than 1 flight in the afternoon. So he shouldn't have been there with me that day.
Right.
So the other thing that happened that morning was that we had to land at Brent Charlie and Brent Delta. 20 passengers for Brent Charlie, 20 passengers for Brent Delta, and bring 22 back. 44 were coming back. Last minute, they gave us Brent Alpha to land as well, to drop 10 kgs of package. By adding one more landing, added 10 minutes to our whole operation.
Okay.
If the Brent Alpha had not been added, we would have been on the ground before the accident happened, because the accident happened only 2 minutes before landing. So that's another thing, which is, just coincidences were happening all the time. So on the way out, I was a handling pilot.
Mm.
So I was doing the flying, and the non-handling pilot does all the admin duties, does all the radios, keeps an eye on the instrument. Yeah, keeps an eye on the radios and whatever, and talks to the whoever wants to talk to us. And the pilot who's handling pilot is doing all the flying. So I was the handling pilot. I landed on Brent Alpha, landed on Charlie. Then I handed over to the co-pilot to take over on the way back. So he went to Brent Delta. And then we got airborne about 10:25 in the morning, set course back to Sambra. We climbed up to about 2,500 feet. The weather was beautiful, absolutely gorgeous weather, and very unusual for November time,
Mm.
and hardly any, very little wind and beautiful sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
And we set course back, and we just put the autopilot on, and we chit chatting to pass the time.
Mm.
And about 40 miles, we got permission to start descending, and we pressed the button for the cabin attendant to do all the checks and everything, get the passengers ready for landing. And we started descending down to 1,000 feet, and he had done all the checks. And then we got clearance to go down to 500 feet, and we changed over to control tower, and we were on finals. I told my company 2 minutes to landing, just a routine things. We were doing everything,
Right.
and about 3 or 4 minutes before landing, suddenly we started hearing this noise. It was like a whining noise.
Wow.
It didn't sound dangerous to us, and we were discussing where is this noise is coming from, and it seemed to be getting louder. And the cabin attendant came in at that time and gave us thumbs up, passengers are ready to land. And then he heard us talking about where this noise is coming from. He says the noise is coming from top of his head, which is the gearbox right on top of him.
Oh boy. Uh-huh.
So even he didn't seem concerned about it. He didn't think it was dangerous or anything like that. Now by the time we were down to about 400 feet, so he opened the cabin door, closed the cabin door.
And you were still over the water, or where had you?
Yeah. The Sambra airport is over water both sides. The runway is in the strip,
Mm-hmm.
and there's water on North Sea on one side and Atlantic on the other side.
Oh boy. Uh-huh.
It's a little strip on the ground, but there's water on either side. So our finals are on water. So we were about 300 feet and about 2.5, 3 miles from the runway. I'd asked for clearance to land, and the SC rescue helicopter was based in Sambra Airport, and he had got permission to take off to do training.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw him take off at 11:29.
Mm.
So I knew in the back of my mind that he's airborne, that he'll be in the vicinity. And I'm on finals, and I got thumbs up to land. They gave me clearance to land. So while we're discussing the noise, I told the co-pilot, I said, doesn't matter, we're landing anyway. We'll tell our engineers to have a look at the noise before we go for our next flight.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the decision we took. So, and we're carrying on descending now. We're about just below 300 feet. Our speed was reducing, and the cabin attendant having given thumbs up, had opened the cabin door, and then closed the cabin door behind him. And I don't think he had time to sit down, because then there was an almighty bang.
Mm-hmm.
Now what had happened was the front gear and the top, the noise that was coming, the front gear was breaking up.
Oh boy.
So
Uh-huh.
once the gear broke, that is the noise we heard. And the two rotors are intermeshing. One is going clockwise, one is going anti-clockwise, and they overlap about 60% or more. They
Mhm.
overlap. And so once the front rotor started slowing down, when the gear broke, the two rotors hit each other, and
Oh,
that is the bang we heard.
oh my God.
And the huge bang and the vibration that created when the rotors hit each other, the rear rotor along with the gearbox parted company from the helicopter, weighing more than a ton.
Oh.
So you can imagine the Chinook now, one set of rotor at the back, one set of rotor in the front, keeping it horizontal.
Mm.
So the rear rotor disappeared,
Disappeared.
the rear end of the helicopter fell. So next thing, I could see the sky in front of me.
Oh my.
It was almost like being in a fighter aeroplane climbing vertically up. And of course, whiplash happened at that time. We were doing 100 knots or not, and suddenly we're doing 0 knots, zero
Oh boy.
knots. So with the whiplash, I think quite a lot of people died with the whiplash. My co-pilot definitely died at that time, because
My.
when we discovered his body, only thing wrong with him was his neck had broken. Now, why his neck broke and mine didn't break? Because I was the non-handling pilot. I was sitting with my back resting onto the backrest. So the
Okay.
whiplash on me was not as bad, because when he was handling pilot, his back was not resting on the backrest.
Right.
So
Right.
when he got the whiplash, his neck broke. So you can imagine, if I had been the handling pilot, my neck would have broken. You know, he's only 3 feet away from me,
Wow.
and even the passenger who survived, his original seat was right at the back,
Mm-hmm.
but he was one of the last passengers to board, and the
Mm.
only seat that left was the very front seat, right in the front, and that seat. it was facing backwards. 42 seats faced forwards and 2 seats faced backwards. So
Wow.
he was sitting in one of those seats. But having said that, the guy sitting next to him, who was also facing backwards, died.
He died.
So it is just potluck. There was no reason for either or the two of us to survive. Absolutely
Mm-hmm.
no reason at all.
Wow.
So now I could see the sky in front of me,
Mm-hmm.
but the helicopter is actually going backwards because the
Yeah.
gravity had taken over and was pulling us down.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So from about 250 feet to the time we hit the water, I calculated, with the formulas, and our speed must have gained, and by the time the impact took place, we must have hit at about 100 miles an hour, roughly.
Oh boy.
So once I grabbed hold of my cyclic, which is right in front of me, and I pushed it all the way forward.
Forward.
The front rotor was still connected to the cyclic stick, and it responded, and
Uh-huh.
it flipped open. It broke the cockpit from the main cabin. It flipped open, but the cabin was still attached to the cockpit was still attached to the main cabin at the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Only the whole airframe had broken. You know. So at one time I could see the sky, and the other time I could see the sea. I was looking down. You know.
Wow.
Now it felt like I was in a roller coaster. In the Disney World. And I was hoping in my dreams that once we reach the water, we'll level out and everybody will sort of walk out.
Oh.
Of course, when we hit the water, the and of course on the way down, the one of the blades had chopped off part of the cockpit.
Mm-hmm.
The prospects on the co-pilot side had broken, and debris from there was flying in and hitting the left side of my face. So my left side of the face was quite cut up, but fortunately nothing hit my eyes, and my nose was broken.
Mm-hmm.
But everything else is okay. So now we're coming down and we hit the water, and on impact, rest of the people died. Because the impact, you can imagine, hitting at 90 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour, the impact was huge. So rest of the people died at that time. Nobody drowned. Of all the 45 people who died, nobody drowned. So when we hit the water, the cockpit broke off from the main cabin. The floor broke, and it very gently hit the water. Very, very gentle. I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel anything when we hit the water. There was no impact.
That's because the rotor was holding up, the front rotor was holding up the cockpit
No, no, no,
portion.
nothing to do with the front rotor. The main impact was taken by the main cabin, and when nearly 25 feet of the main cabin was smashed completely. It's. I'll send you the photographs of my presentation of the Chinook as well. You can have a look at it. And the cockpit sort of gently broke off and fell in the sea from about 20 feet. It was very, very gentle, very, very gentle. And then once we hit the water, we started going down, down, down under the water, and then it turned over to his side. The window, my side, the emergency window flew off at that stage, and there was a big hole there. And we kept going down, down. Maybe we must have gone down maybe 10 meters, but 30 feet or so before it stopped. You know? And I could see the sunlight. I knew which way I had to come out. So I left the seat and I started to swim, but then it was getting dark. So I realized I was going the wrong way. So I turned around
Wow.
and came through.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, I discovered that, the four seat belts that we wear, two over the thighs and two over the shoulders, and there's a lock in the middle. And I never unlocked it. When the cockpit was brought back to Aberdeen, they found that the seat belt was still locked, and one of the straps was broken. Obviously, I can't break the strap,
Yeah.
but how it broke, I have no idea at all. But I didn't struggle to come out. I came out quite easily.
Mm.
I have absolutely everybody was surprised how I came out when the seat belt is still locked, because the seats, especially over the thighs, are quite tight.
Right. And you must have been wearing some sort of flotation device at that time?
The flotation must have helped. I had no flotation. We used to carry a life jacket, but we used to keep it on the side. It was very uncomfortable to wear. And even the survival suit we used to wear
Mm.
was survival suit was sealed on my hands, on my feet, and everything. It is completely sealed.
Mm.
But in front of the chest, we had a zip. So we used to open the zip, and the water, because the cockpit is like a glass house. It used
Yeah,
to get
yeah.
very hot. So we used to leave the zip open so to stay comfortable, you know. So I had my zip open, so I had no time to put it on, and I had no time to put my life jacket on. So life jacket was still lying in the cockpit. So I swam out through this window and I swam on the way to the top, and beautiful sunshine, absolutely beautiful one sunshine, and all around me was wreckage. Everywhere was there was wreckage, and there was fuel, there was hydraulic fuel, and then suddenly one body popped up next to me, another one, another one, another one, about eight
Oof.
nine bodies popped up next to me, and they were not doing anything. I was amazed. I didn't think anybody would die. That's the first time it occurred to me that some people didn't make it, you know. And then I saw a piece of wreckage which looked like a bowl, you know. So I grabbed hold of it and I climbed into it. I thought, oh, that's wonderful. And I'm out of the water now. And then 2 seconds later, one wave came and pushed me back. And the temperature of the water, North Sea, is very cold. You know, it must have been 6 or 7 degrees or 8 degrees temperature. You know, it was very cold. And of course, at the back of my mind, I said the SC rescue helicopter, I had seen him take off. So I knew normally would have gone for training at 9:30. Because of some problem they had, they took off at 11:29. You know, so you can
Mhm.
imagine if they'd gone at 9:30, they would have come back and landed back by now. And if they had to start again and do everything, it takes 5-10 minutes extra. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
so
Mm.
he was already in the air. And he asked the control tower, "Where is the Chinook? Is it Chinook is on finals? This is where I can't see anybody on finals." So it says, "Oh, I can see something in the water. I'll go and have a look." So he was coming straight towards me anyway. So that was in the
Wow.
back of my mind that he'll come and pick me up, you know. So I was holding on to this wreckage and not too worried about anything, just feeling a little bit cold and breathing very hard and everything. And
Mm.
when I saw the rescue helicopter coming, I waved at them. They came over on top of me, and one gentleman came down with a strap, put a strap around me, winched me up, put me in the helicopter.
Mhm.
And then the passenger who survived, as I said, he was sitting in the seat right behind me. And because the cockpit had broken open, so there was a big
Mhm.
hole behind him. So he was unconscious. And luckily his suit was sealed completely, you know. So when he reached whatever 20-30 feet with the cabin, the water threw him out because his suit was full of air and it became like football, you know. So he reached the surface, and he suddenly opened his eyes. Wave came and opened his eyes, and one dinghy inflated next to him, literally next
Mhm.
to him. So he
My.
grabbed hold of the dinghy. There was a rope in the dinghy. He put the rope around his hand, and then passed out again. You know, he was unconscious again. So
Wow.
when the helicopter came to pick me up, he heard the helicopter noise. He woke up again, and then he waved. So we went and picked him up as well. So both of us were in the helicopter. And
Mhm.
then I was trying to tell the cabin crew there, the winchman, can he cut my socks off so at least the
Mhm.
water can go out, you know? Because
Oh,
even though I was outside the North Sea, even though I was outside the sea, but I was still in the water. You know what I
right.
mean?
Yeah.
My suit was full of water. So he took, because the helicopter is so noisy, very difficult to explain to anybody in the noisy atmosphere. Eventually, he understood what I was telling him. So he cut my socks off, cut the socks off the passenger as well, and all the water we had collected managed to get out. In the
Wow.
meantime, our eyes were closing, and we couldn't talk and we couldn't do anything. And they were looking for 45 passengers. You know, they were going up and down, but there was no other movement going on. And another helicopter got airborne to help with the research, and a boat had been launched because we were only 2 miles from the runway. So the crew went and told the captain, "Sir, these two guys are also going to go. Let's take them to the hospital because their temperature
Mm.
is very low and hypothermia is
Mhm.
setting in." So they rushed us to Lerwick Hospital, which is about 15 miles away from the airport. So they landed us there, and then we went to the hospital, and the doctor there cut open our clothes completely and wrapped us up like a tin foil so that our body can warm itself,
Yeah, yeah.
And after about half an hour, 45 minutes, I recovered and I was able to talk, and they gave me clothes to wear and everything. Then I asked the doctor, any more survivors? And he said, just the two of you.
Wow.
I was flabbergasted.
Mhm.
47 people we had on board. 47. I was absolutely flabbergasted. And even the two of us, there was absolutely no reason for us to survive. Just potluck, complete potluck. And we were in the hospital for what 4 or 5 days in
Mhm.
Sambra, and then
Mm.
we came to Aberdeen Airport. So I was Aberdeen Hospital, and there we were there for what 2 weeks,
Mhm.
and then I got discharged, and only thing broken was my nose and my toes were broken. You know,
Wow. Hmm.
and I was very very fortunate. And by about January February time, I'd recovered I'd got my medical back, and I
Mm.
was ready to fly.
Wow.
And my company kept sending me to this psychiatrist, that psychiatrist, that psychologist. They wanted to make sure my brain was still functioning. And it took about, I think, 8 to 9 specialists I saw, and they all gave me thumbs up. And then I started flying in April. So 6 months I was off flying. So I
Yeah, that's
started
what
flying
one
in
would have
April.
thought after that traumatic experience. You would have hung up your boots or said no more flying. But
Well, company said they'll give me pension. Yeah. Company said they'll give me pension. They're quite happy to give me pension. But I said I'm only 45, and what am I going to do? If I'm going to just sit at home and you can't pass the time. The only thing I knew was how to fly, and I always loved flying. I flew for 20 years after that. No, I think military training makes a big difference to you. The Air Force life had made a huge difference to me. So I was able to cope with whatever was going on.
thank you very much, sir, for your service as well as for all the time you've taken today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Visual Chinook on 4 Bridge landing. Just need 70, Roger, report back to southeast, connect, speed 4, midway, and field selected.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for this week. Join us again next week. In the meantime, sign up for updates at blueskiespodcast.com. There you'll find links to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also write to us with your comments, questions, suggestions, and feedback from the website or to blueskies@prganapati.com. Subscribe to the podcast on any podcasting platform such as Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and even on YouTube. If you like what you heard, share it with your friends, give us a rating in your favorite podcasting app, and write us a review. It will help other people find us. I want to give my thanks to Saurav Chordia for our logo and Prithvik for the music. I want to reiterate that all the views expressed here are personal, and this podcast has not been approved by or reviewed by the Air Force, Ministry of Defense, or any branch of the government. In the meantime, stay safe and Jai Hind.